guys. This is chapter 4, and we're going to do 2 parts, so make sure you watch them in order. The plane just crashed. He was in the lake. He was able to pull himself, or get to the top surface, and then pull himself to shore. All right. The memory was like a knife cutting into him, slicing deep into him with hate, the secret. He had been riding his 10-speed bike with a friend named Terry. They'd been taking a run on a bike trail and decided to come back a different way. A way that took them past the Amber Mall. Brian remembered everything in incredible detail. Remember the time on the bank clock in the mall, flashing 3:31, then the temperature, 82, and the date. All the numbers were part of the memory. All of his life was part of the memory. Terry had just turned to smile at him about something, and Brian looked over Terry's head and saw her, his mother, sitting in a different station wagon. The secret. Brian opened his eyes and screamed. For seconds, he did not know where he was, only that the crash was still happening, and he was going to die, and he screamed until his breath was gone. Then silence, filled with sobs as he pulled in air, half crying. How could it be so quiet? Moments ago, there was nothing but noise, crashing and tearing, screaming, now quiet. Some birds were singing. How could birds be singing? His legs felt wet as he raised up on his hands and looked back down at them. They were in the lake. Strange. They went down into the water. He tried to move, but pain hammered into him and made his breath shorten in gasps, and he stopped, his legs still in the water. Pain. Memory. He turned again, and the sun came across the water. Late sun cut into his eyes that made him turn away. It was over then, the crash. He was alive. The crash is over, and I am alive, he thought. Then his eyes closed, and he lowered his head for minutes that seemed longer. When he opened them again, it was evening, and some of the sharp pain had abated. There were many dull aches, and the crash came back to him fully. Into the trees and onto the lake. The plane had crashed and sunk into the lake, and he had somehow pulled free. He raised himself and crawled out of the water, grunting in pain of movement. His legs were on fire, and his forehead felt as if someone had been pounding on it with a hammer, but he could move. He pulled his legs out of the lake and crawled on his hands and knees until he was away from the wet, soft shore and near a small stand of brush of some kind. Then he went down, only this time to rest, to save something of himself. He lay on his side and put his head on his arm and closed his eyes because that was all that he could do now, all he could think about being able to do. He closed his eyes and slept, dreamless, deep and down. There was almost no light then when he opened his eyes again. The darkness of the night was thick, and for a moment he began to panic. To see, he thought. To see everything, and he could not see. But he turned his head without moving his body and saw that across the lake the sky was light gray, and the sun was starting to come up, and he remembered that it had been evening when he went to sleep. Must be morning now, he mumbled it, almost in a hoarse whisper, as the thickness of sleep left him and the world came back. He was still in pain, all over pain. His legs were cramped and drawn up, tight and aching. His back hurt when he tried to move. Worst was keening throb in his head and pulsed with every beat of his heart. It seemed the whole crash had happened to his head. He rolled on his back and felt his sides and his legs moving things slowly. He rubbed his arms. Nothing seemed to be shattered or even sprained all that badly. When he was 9, he had plowed his small dirt bike into a parked car and broken his ankle. He had to wear casts for 8 weeks, and there was nothing like that now. Nothing broken, just battered around a bit. His forehead felt massively swollen to the touch, almost like a mound out over his eyes, and it was so tender that his fingers grazed it he nearly cried. But there was nothing he could do about it, and like the rest of him, it seemed to be bruised more than broken. I'm alive, he thought. I'm alive. It could have been different. There could have been death. I could have been done. Like the pilot, he thought suddenly. The pilot in the plane, down in the water, down in the blue water, strapped in the seat. He sat up, or tried to. The first time he fell back, but on the second attempt, grunting with effort, he managed to come to a sitting position and scrunched sideways until his back was against a small tree where he sat facing the lake, watching the sky getting lighter and lighter with the coming dawn. His clothes were wet and clammy, and there was a faint chill. He pulled the torn remnants of his windbreaker pieces really around the shoulders and tried to hold the heat of his body could find. He could not think, could not make thought patterns work right. Things seemed to go back and forth between reality and imagination, except that it was all reality. One second he seemed only to have imagined that there was a plane crash, that he had fought out of a sinking plane and swum to shore, that it all had happened to some other person or in a movie playing in his mind. Then he could feel his clothes wet and cold and his forehead with the slash of pain through his thoughts. And he would know it was real, that it had really happened, but all in a haze world. So he sat and stared at the lake, felt the pain come and go in waves, and he watched the sun come over the end of the lake. All right, I'm going to stop there. Okay, part 2 coming up. Maybe.